Dennis is coming right now. We're live.
All right, welcome tonight, everybody. We are now at the August 17th meeting of the Lake State Planning Commission. So I'll wrap the pledge of allegiance.
Sorry.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was like, should I wait till we're all stood up? All right, do we dance on or? Up at the top. Next, where she was there. Well, she was there for a while. So I'll say all commissioners are current or presently here, and we also have, thank Councilmember Peter, our liaison, for being here also. And we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment on anybody online? So we will move on to our action items, which is the approval of the August 3rd meeting minutes. All commissioners have had a chance to review. Anybody have any changes they wish to suggest? You're not gonna get a motion to approve the minutes. Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? These are approved. Our next is discussion item with the 2022 comprehensive plan docket, public services, utilities, and capital facilities element. Dave Drupp, please.
All right, thank you, Chair Welch.
Yes, sir.
David Levithan, Planning Manager. So we are here tonight. This will be our last work session to discuss the various kind of minor updates to the comprehensive plans that are included as part of the 2022 comprehensive plan docket. We've discussed land use, the land use map, the parks and recreation elements. And now tonight we're talking about the two remaining chapters that we've been updating on an annual basis to keep them current, fresh, and to reflect the most updated demographic and basically other things that have been done by our partner agencies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the public services and utilities today, and then Russ is going to handle the capital facilities. It should be pretty brief discussion, and we'd love to have any comments or questions that you have. So as far as the public services and utilities, similar to previous years, it's pretty minor updates that we are proposing. The majority of it is based on adopting capital facility plans that have been adopting by reference capital facility plans that have been adopted over the last year by our partner agencies. Both the Lake Stevens School District and the Sonoma School District have adopted their capital facility plan within about the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so that's something we adopt by reference. Kind of the changes to the actual elements are pretty minor. It's reflecting the updated demographic information, some of the projections. I'm happy to talk a little bit about some of the findings. So the Lake Stevens School District just I think last week adopted their CFP. They're projecting about 1,000 student increase over the next 6 years. So they projected the need for 3 new elementary schools and 1 middle school. That's pretty aggressive within 6 years, basically capital improvement program. So as we move into our 2024 update, I think we'll do a little bit more analysis and really reflect that and do some kind of more major updates to the public services chapter. The Sonoma School District, which includes just the southeast corner of the city. So I did kind of some very back of the envelope map based on kind of the current population within that area of Lake Stevens, then I'm guessing that we have about 100 to 150 kids in the district. It's really not that many. But that will increase as we have a number of developments that are proposed in that area. They're projecting not quite as much. They're actually, the Sonoma School District is interesting in that their projections actually are differing from the Office of Financial Management. They kind of don't really agree with their methodology or their numbers. So they actually have within their CFP, they have two sets of projections. So that's been interesting. They're projecting not really much of an increase over the next 6 years. Both districts saw some decrease related to COVID as far as people holding their kids out of school. Some people moving to private schools, but they're projecting by 2044 that they would add about 2,000 students. And kind of going back to Lake Stevens, they're projecting about 3,000 students by 2044. So that's a pretty big increase over the approximately 9,000 students that are currently in this district. So yeah, as we move into the 2024 periodic update, we'll definitely be aware of this. By the time we get to adoption, they'll already be working on their updated CFP. They basically update on a 2-year basis, and so we'll make sure that our comprehensive plan is updated to reflect that information. A couple of the other capital facility plans that have been adopted or in the process of being adopted. So the sewer district has been working on their comprehensive plan, basically their general facility plan it's been over the past year, a little bit more than a year. They have a consultant that's been working on that. They're currently kind of in the environmental review and the draft review stage. They're anticipating that that will be adopted probably sometime in October. So depending on when we actually get to public hearing with the city council and whether they stay on schedule, we would adopt that either this year or adopt it as part, by reference, as part of the 2023 update as far as the annual dockets. The Sonoma County PUD has a water plan that they've been working on for a while. They've had a draft out since about March. And they're not quite sure when they're going to get to the adoption stage. So similar to that, if it's been adopted, we would adopt it by reference this year, or else that would be something that we would do next year. And then Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue, they adopted a new capital facilities plan last year in 2021. We're not actually required to adopt that one by reference, but we do discuss that is some of the track changes that are shown within attachment 1, which is public services and utilities chapter. So other than that, there's not really a whole lot that's involved with this kind of annual update that we do. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions about the chapter. If you have general questions about processes for capital facilities plans with other districts or other agencies, I'm happy to try to respond to those as well. So we can kind of stop here and kind of answer any questions, or we can move on to the capital facilities.
I have a quick question on the schools. When it comes to the Lake Stevens School District plans, how much of that growth are they dividing that growth between who lives in Marysville and us, since there's so much growth in the Whiskey Ridge area? And those are Lake Stevens School District children, a lot of them are. Do they have a difference when it comes to our plans? That's how they separate, is there a difference there?
So the city of Marysville, because they do extend into it, they're required to adopt, similar to how we're required to adopt school district CFP by reference, even though we only have a small portion, we're required to adopt it by reference. The city of Marysville adopts it by reference as well. I did not see kind of a different projection or kind of a city of Marysville specific, just because that kind of northwest quarter of the city would then move to Marysville, that draws from both Marysville, the northwest portion of Lake Stevens, as well as incorporated. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think the city of Marysville reviews it as far as their needs. We review it as far as kind of our needs and the needs of the district. And the district, I don't think really differentiates based on geographical boundaries. They have basically their kind of their feeding area, kind of for the elementary schools and middle schools, which areas of the city and which areas of the beach they go to each individual school. So I'm not sure how specifically that related to kind of the level of development. They should be reflecting that, they're, from the city of Marysville, kind of.
That's what I might say, reflected their capital plan, depending on where they are building the elementaries.
They do,
And
similar
the
to,
middle.
yeah, similar to how they review kind of our billable lands and the billable lands inventory for Lake Stevens and kind of what our permit data looks like. They also do that. For the city of Marysville.
And again, I have a little bit of information. I was in a meeting today with the superintendent for the Stevens School District, and he did definitely talk a little bit about the capital facilities plan and recognize that the growth patterns have been so strong in South Lake Stevens for a number of years, but over this last sort of cycle, they definitely recognized the uptick in the Whiskey Ridge area. So that does have them reevaluating where the needs are going to be for the new elementary, middle school, and like, so they are adjusting, looking for those opportunities. And outside of their capital facilities plan, and Commissioner Cotter Davis can probably attest to this, they go through a redistricting process or a boundary process internal to the school district, where they look at how many kids are redrawing from each neighborhood to make sure that they still have sort of equal type numbers at each campus and make adjustments internally on that. So yes, they are looking at the difference between City of Lake Stevens and Whiskey Ridge area.
Thanks.
And the middle school that's included in the CFP, that's actually a new addition. So that's something that they've applied over the last 2 years, that they have that additional.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before we move on? Yes, we keep going.
This is Community Development Director, right, for the record. So I'll talk a little bit about our capital facilities tonight. So not a lot of changes every year. We sort of come through and update the tables on what projects have been completed, what projects are in the queue. What's a little bit different in this year's capital facilities plan is myself and the Public Works Director met with the City Council before their break and sort of went over some new scoring and ranking prioritization metrics to sort of help them make decisions on which they prioritize the capital facility dollars. And so that will be reflected in updated capital facilities tables. Some of the metrics that will be included, say for roads and for sidewalks, would be what's the attached zoning, what does it make connections between commercial and residential, residential to residential, residential to public facilities, and then get a score. We'll look at safety data. Are there recognized accidents in this area? If there are, then that's going to bump up the score as a priority place. And then there's also going to be sort of an X factor, which is the opportunity factor. If, say, we know we're going to be able to get a grant, we have a coalition, maybe some citizens group that's going to help sponsor that, and the stars are aligning, we might get that X factor score that might push it up above another project. And then we've done a similar exercise with the facilities, so structures, like this building, a city hall, and police renovations, and then parks. We've gone through similar scoring metric, and we actually worked with our new parks director this week to refine that. And what that's going to look like, again, when you take the zoning into consideration, where's the park, what's the zone, closest zone that's related to, what level of park is it, what services and amenities will this park capital project increase that might not have been there before. And then we will also sort of compare to the streets and sidewalks plan. Does it create linkages? Does it have the infrastructure to safely get people to that park? So again, really kind of a thoughtful way to project these. And we've had looser methodology in the past, but this is the first time we really made a concerted effort to really be able to establish metrics, be able to present those to city council with data to help them make decisions on where they want to prioritize projects. And again, there's always this X factor that that can adjust up or down based on sort of council feedback. The other thing, so I'll pause there for a minute and see if there are any questions, and when we put the packet together, we didn't have all of the new table yet. And so we'll continue to work through that. It won't look a lot different. Again, it's just really the ranking of where projects are going to fall on that list, and that'll be something we want to go over with you at the public hearing, and the council will have sort of final say so when they go into the budgeting process to allocate funds, whether it's impact fees, REIT dollars, grants, etc.
Will the new figures for the priority be in the document before we go to public hearing and,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
and then how does, when it comes to the sidewalks, how do we rank those projects, and are we submitting for, say, across the school, how many are we?
Yes, so the prioritization of sidewalks will be very similar to streets. You know, what's the safety data? Connections, again, really big thing, but in this case, a big metric for us is connection to schools, specifically safe routes to schools. So, you know, examples like 91st or 123rd, do they provide a connection to a school? So that's going to be a really important ranking score. And again, looking, is it creating pedestrian focused zoning in a commercial area? Is it creating connections between residential? And so, yeah, we'll use those different types of metrics to recommend where we should be. As far as grant opportunities across the board for all of the projects that are listed, the city aggressively goes after lots of different grants. We do have a Safe Routes to School grant out this year for 91st, as well as other major road improvements, continuations of Southwick Stevens multi-use path, a new connector between Centennial Trail and downtown 16. So we'll spend some time on that as I sort of walk through the next piece of this with you, just to, I thought it might be fun that the council every year we give them an update of, hey, these are the projects we've completed. And just recently we had a breakfast with our federal and state delegation, our representatives, and invited them, and wanted to sort of highlight some of the projects that they've helped fund and just give them a flavor of what we've accomplished over the last 5 to 10 years in all of these segments. So I wanted to share that with you tonight to sort of put your work in context of, it's just not sort of a pass through, that actually significant projects have been completed in the city that come out of this planning document.
On the, thank you. On the table for the capital programs, says it got updated last year. Is there, how often do we update, like, especially when it comes to the costs of the respective costs with inflation stuff? How, is there a standard, or is it a regular interval that we update those costs so we know how that's going to affect us? Or
Sure. So when it goes from the 20-year plan into the 6-year plan, we'll definitely take a harder look at what is that cost. And then obviously when it goes from the 6-year plan into the budget requests, we have to go through and do a pretty solid budget analysis. And so, yeah, that happens at least 3 different phases. When next year we go into 2024 periodic update, we'll be bringing on consultants to do just that, make sure that we're still using the right engineering estimates. So next year we will go through total overhaul of all the prices, and then that will affect our impact fees. And we'll need to take a hard look at, are our impact fees still in line with the actual projects, project needs.
Usually we didn't do an annual update to the tables of the comp plan in the Public Works Department or the city overall, required to update their CNP on a basis. So they'd be having to do that. We just take that word and put it for the comp plan.
great, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay. And I'll just start here. Mrs. Finch, can I share?
Yes, you should be able to.
So I'll just start here with this document, and this is an example of what the new capital facilities plan would look like. just to give you an idea, so this is the facilities section. So again, what's the project? So the food station, city hall, and then the description of the project. And what you don't see is there is a database behind this that's linked to this that the scoring is occurring through, and then this is going to pop out those scores, and then within the text of the document, we describe what some of those metrics will look like. And so that just gives you an example of what you will see, and these should have pretty accurate cost estimates when they come to you, and again, how the ranking flows out based on the inputs going.
Okay, I'm sorry, Russ, real quick. How does our ranking of projects, or I don't know if it even relates to each other, on how maybe the state ranks projects for approval for grants and things like that? Does that correlate to each other at all, or like to make us more qualified for something, or see how they rank? I know they rank things sometimes.
So that happens at the periodic update,
Okay.
and we have to make sure that our goals and policies across our different chapters are correct. And say when the Parks chapter update every 5 or 6 years, the Recreation Conservation Office has to go in and audit that chapter and then approve that chapter. Likewise, when we do the 10-year comprehensive plan update, the Department of Commerce, Puget Sound Regional Council have to go through our plan, and again, they do an audit of it and give us final approval, written approval that says, yeah, you meet all of the requirements, and part of that translates into code work. Say several years ago, we did a complete streets chapter, make sure that we're consistent when we do our different code updates. Some of the ones we go through in the cycle are linked to our concurrency with GMA's approval through whether Commerce or Puget Sound Regional Council. So yes, there is a metric that they're going to look at and how they're going to rank projects. And the biggest thing is it has to be in our capital facilities plan, and then moving into our 6-year and then our annual plan to even ask for funding. So that's the key.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Any questions from the virtual audience? Ms. Huxford?
Thank you for asking. No, I am watching from afar, and I'm sorry to not be in the room with you, but you don't want me in the room with you today. So you can thank me later. But no, I've been following, and I think that at this point, I'm curious to see where this will head, but I appreciate the debrief tonight.
Great. So again, I just wanted to share with you all tonight, just a slideshow we gave to our legislative partners. Previously, we've had a lot of support from the 44th. We had a welcome to the 39th, and our federal delegates that are in attendance, or at least their dates. One of the things we shared was just some demographics to sort of set the stage. You all sort of know this, the city's population continues to grow. What's pretty interesting is if you look at the blowout on this pie chart, and this is really reflective of your conversation about sidewalks and obviously about parks, about 30% of our population is under 18, which also reflects on this growing school age population. And then if you take that out to the next demographic, you've got 50% of the population, under their mid-30s. So pretty powerful numbers with a family-aged population. You see the median age, then we look at tapestry segments. So that's just sort of artful terms put to demographics and up and coming families to try and reflect, say, the difference between more common vernacular Gen Z or Gen X or the millennials. It just gives them a more qualified type description based on financial choices they're making, education levels, careers. So it's actually fairly sophisticated, but it's just another descriptor. And then what's our average household size? And then just again, we tried to just share with them, this will be interesting to you when you've seen these numbers and they continue to grow, about 3,000 residential units over the last sort of 10 years, over 250,000 square feet of new commercial development, either constructed or being constructed. So those are pretty powerful numbers that reflect on how the city continues to grow. And obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about where we are as it relates to our growth targets. And I won't go through all of these projects, but this is just again sort of broken out sort of year by year what we've been able to accomplish. So in 2018, that's when the city really started committing to doing capital projects. You see that represents 4 projects. Going up to 2021 would have been our busiest year. 2022, even though maybe less projects, it hasn't been less busy because we're continuing to manage the projects from 2021 that are still being constructed in 22 and the new projects that are moving forward. And then you see the future list that's really 2023, 2024 type projects. So huge lists, and everything on the future project we've touched this year in some capacity, whether it's preparation for grants, project descriptions, cost estimating, grant applications, you name it.
What's one quick question about 2022 and future? I've asked you so quite a bit about the future of the historical museum.
Yes.
I don't see it on the future list. In terms of the biggest rankings, the 4th on the priority list for.
Yeah. So that's a fair question, and I will say I did not put this slide together, but yes, that is definitely on the city's horizon for a future project. We've applied to the State Historical Society for a very significant grant to help fund that project. And so the fate of that project sort of is reliant on that grant right now as a first step. So you're right, this table should be updated to reflect that.
From what you understand right now, has the Historical Society shown any capacity for the ability to fundraise now for the $3.7 million building in any capacity, much less just the regular maintenance of a facility that size?
What I can answer is the Historical Society has done fundraising, and they've done fundraising in the hopes of for their internal displays and some operations, but as to contribution to the building or those future discussions, those really I don't have enough information to provide.
Just wondering if that's an ongoing grant that the city is applying for, or
the grant the city is applying for is just for construction.
Okay.
And like a lot of our other partner agencies, we go through some sort of an interlocal agreement, a memorandum of understanding, and we do have lease agreements with a lot of the groups that we home, and so we'll continue to work with our partners.
Great.
Okay, then just run through some streets and sidewalks projects, and a lot of these are just past accomplishments again. And if you see either underlined text or yellow text, those are just to give a call out to our delegates that helped us get the money for those particular pieces. So we have the Frontier Village access. So as we were preparing for the new construction underway at 9 and 204, we knew that we needed to be able to get people in and out of Frontier Village. The mayor likes to say it's like the Hotel California. You can get in, but you can never leave. So the city said we need to get people out of there. And so we worked with WashDOT and we're able to get some funds together to create this Village Way access, which does give another exit point and entrance point into the mall. That'll be really important as the real construction starts. We completed the 20th Street widening project, pretty cool project that started probably 15 years ago in Sonoma County. The city inherited it, and it took another 10 years for us to be able to build it after annexing that area. We have the 5-lane section, and the newer component to that was adding the mobility lane. So that's the HOV lane for the morning traffic heading into that. So that was an addition that hadn't been part of it, but through a grant with WashDOT, we were able to accomplish that and putting in local funds. Some safe routes to school stuff we talked about already. So we have done one section of safe routes to school on May 1st, and then you'll see the phase 2. That's what we're applying for right now, 1,300 linear feet. About another $2 million plus to expand that. In the interim, the city has put up lane delineators, so the candlesticks to demarcate where the walking path is and keep it a little safer for traffic, school age kids. And this is something we're going to continue to pursue with at least the Lake Stevens School District, because I know that's a priority to them is with bus driver shortages and other things. How do we get kids safely from schools to neighborhoods? So continue to work with them.
Hey Russ, is that project on both, for ourselves on both sides or just?
It's sidewalk on one side. It just continues, so the sidewalks that's there, and then we create any of the crossings as necessary.
All right, thanks.
And then the Callow project, another neat project, so that we had a major subdivision and had 250 homes in the northern part of the city. We were able to partner with that developer, bring in some local dollars and build a sidewalk almost from Highway 92 to Widening. So that's a huge win. 91st water line, that was a project that the city bonded. So that was the construction of 91st ongoing south of 20th Street. And as part of that, we had to cross and replace portions of Everett's water line and then build the new road 24th. So a lot of that is based on bond debt, and that really goes for economic development and connectivity in that part of the city. We have the intersection at Highway 9 and 24th that's under construction. We received a lot of state funding for that. They put local dollars in, got dollars from developers. They did a huge project just for connectivity in the south part of the city and to make sure that we can have complete economic development in commercial zone districts. And we'll just talk about facilities really quick. So a few facilities we've done the decant facility. What that is all the sweepings from when they clean the roads, suck out the stuff out of all catch basins. All that goo has to go somewhere. So this is just a dewatering station. So they put the spoils in there, they collect the solids, take those to the transfer station, and then the water that comes out of that goes into the sewer system and then is treated in the sewer system. And that's a big stormwater project. We obviously bought and renovated the police station through bonded debt. The Lake Stevens Library, so we housed the Lake Stevens Library in a temporary location. Before we moved into that site, the city invested heavily in that building. We did the foundation, parking lot, and we continue to work with them on a variety of maintenance issues. We'll be working on probably paint the building this year. We do HVAC system and some ongoing maintenance of that facility.
Russ, what's the status of Snow Isles partnership? New library on Chapel Hill?
Yep, so they have received some seed money to start the project, and they have hired a design firm. So they're moving forward with the design of that building. We have some, like I said, seed money to do some of the groundwork, the clearing of the site, probably demo of those houses, and then we'll continue to fundraise and do the construction.
Okay.
The building you're in, I don't know if any of you remember this building, but you would, we had bought this building and this whole second level had been just constructed by probably the tenants that didn't meet any building code. The staircase was about like this, and you walked straight up into a beam, and so we were able to do a thorough remodel of this facility. It just wasn't a usable space, and now it's a very comfortable space. Obviously, we can house city meetings in it. There's offices for all of our public works administrative staff. We've moved a lot of our new parks department into this building, and we have the whole
Fully air conditioned.
fully air conditioned. Okay, parks and trails. So just to run through some quick parks, Caballero Park, that was a 3-way partnership with Sonoma County and the state to build phase one of that, which included the skate park. And it's kind of interesting because Lake Stevens actually took the lead on the public engagement for that, the design, the review, and the agencies helped fund it, even though it is still a Sonoma County park. And obviously that was a great success for us, continues to be, and we look forward to future phases of that. As I mentioned, Lundin Park was our first park that we decided to go in on and renovate, and we had to take down all of the sycamore trees that were in there that had busted up the sidewalks and created a lot of damage. So we did all of the trails in there, we did the basketball court, parking lot, drainage, landscaping. It's took down all of the trees that block the view of the park from Lundin Parkway. So now it's actually a usable, safe space, because a lot of parents didn't even want to go in there because it was so secluded. So it's a safe park now, and because we rebuilt it, we were able to build a partnership with different paddleboard companies over the years that now provide recreational amenity to the public, because the city made this investment to renovate this park. None of you probably are familiar with this, but we have a little park on the north end of the city called North Cove. At one point, there was about a 20-foot berm that you could be on Main Street and not know there was a lake there. So that was, Mayor Spencer's dream, that we put the lake back in Lake Stevens. So we took down the hill. We did phase one, which created the Great Lawn. Phase two, which created the playgrounds, and phase three is what you see now, the spur, the additional plaza area, and just some of the other smaller amenities. And we have a few more projects yet to go, but that's been a huge project, and thankfully we had great support on this from the 44 delegation to really help fund this project. Frontier Heights, I probably know the story of Frontier Heights, a cool project. We took this park over from the HOA that just couldn't maintain the park. We've done phase one, which put a walking path around the park and picnic shelters, some picnic tables, redid the basketball court, and then looking forward to, we have grant applications out right now for phase two, which would create a turf multi-use sports field, again looking to Caproni. It also adds pickleball courts, the state sport, and a growing sport popularity for all age interactions. So we're really excited about that. And again, we look to the 44th, and now Senator Lubbock, prior rep, I think was very helpful to us in getting grant funding to help do phase one of that park. We have the 20th Street ball fields and West Side Trail. That's a project we're really doing with mostly local dollars. And so what that does is utilizes the power lines, and we'll have a trail at some point from 20th Street southeast to Silver Hill. So from the southern city limits to the northern city limits. This is phase one. Within this, sort of the brown rectangle, that's just a rough representation. We will put in a new dog park for this area, and a couple of areas, the shot dog area, and just an open kind of pasture. And that's a cool project. The lower end will continue to have practice fields that are used by lacrosse already with the work we've done, a small playground, and a parking lot. Eagle Ridge Park, we've done some of the early phases, which included the parking lot, the community garden, and we have received grant funding to do the next phase, and that'll probably get kicked off hopefully in 2023, depending on the delivery of the grant, possibly 2024. Not allowed an amphitheater and a playground, really complete the build out of that park. And that was a really important part to our park board. A lot of them joined the board to make that park happen, and really were instrumental in the fundraising to acquire that acreage as it's sat. And as I represented that board over the years, that was the number one thing I always heard: when are we doing Eagle Ridge Park? When are we doing Eagle Ridge Park? And we're finally able to say that yes, we made headway, and we have funding to do the next phase and to sort of complete this 20-year dream for a lot of those folks
This is exciting because when my husband and I moved here in 1996, there was a welcome wagon lady who came to our door. And and she said, we're gonna have a park at Eagle Ridge. So, yay, she's probably so happy.
Lundin Park, I don't know why that says Lundin Park, that should be Davies. So Davies Beach, we're doing the boat docks right now. That's a city sponsored project, and actually our staff did a lot of the work building the docks, the floats, and they're doing the installation of that, and we're ahead of schedule. So that's been a fabulous project. Next year on the pier, we'll resurface the pier and add emergency boats at that facility. Paths, we did the South Lake Stevens multi-use path. The red area is what we've built. We have phase 2 coming, which that's going to fill in some of the gaps and take the project from about 18th, just a little north of 20th Street, down to Highway 9, and that will hook into the roundabout and the multi-use path at 24th and 91st, and loops back up to the new sidewalks and bike lane on 20th Street. So you'll be able to traverse the whole southern side of the city once that phase 2 gets done. The next phase, which we have design money for, takes it east on Chias to the city limits. And then phase 4 will start taking that trail northward. Okay, one of the things you all spent a tremendous amount of time on was downtown and going through the sub-area plan for downtown. And we'll recall that we identified some really big projects with our consultant that we wanted to get done. And this came from a lot of citizen input as we went through surveys and ranking and prioritization. And so this was sort of, what did we want to accomplish? Economic development, check, we're getting ready to sell a city property, completing that sales transaction right now for a mixed-use building downtown right off of North Cove. We built Mill Spur, which obviously now the market has been able to use, and we love it. Aquafest was able to use, and so that's going to be ready for all of our city events. Improving Main Street. We have done a small section of Main Street. We have about a $3 million grant from Puget Sound Regional Council to do the rest of Main Street from 20th to 16th. And then we have potential funding of $2.5 million from the feds to build the intersection at 20th Street and then going north and helping realign the connections between Hartford and Great Neck. And then the regional attraction, we built the mill, we've redone North Cove Park, and the next thing, provide parking with the construction of Mill Spur. It actually adds about 40 public parking spaces. And then next year, we'll probably build a small parking lot off of Mill Spur. We'll add a few more. And then within 18 to 24 months, hopefully if City Hall is relocated, you add another 40 or 50 parking spaces where the current City Hall is. So that's been one of the goals, and we're still trying to work towards that, but that's one of the tougher pieces. I already mentioned the Main Street project. So that's kind of what we're looking at from 16 beyond the intersection. You all know about the mill and what that's done for the city. It was funny that we completed it during COVID. And so it was always really interesting trying to look at it. We started using it for some really small things. And then as the guidance continued to change, we could continue to increase the use of it. Obviously, we hired a full-time person to manage it. Now we've hired a second recreation person to be their backup and continue to do other special events in the city. So it's been a huge success for us. And I know some of you have used it for personal reasons and really enjoyed this. We talked about Mill Spur. So that is nearing completion. We're just waiting for some of the final things, which would be the grand arches going over it and just a few little minor things, but it's nearly ready to go. And then, as I mentioned, we have the project that should be breaking ground next year on the south corner of Millsburg and Main Street. We also just threw in here again for our delegates, just to show them, they've also given us grant money for pandemic recovery through the CARES Act, through the ARPA Act, and also we get funding for a variety of planning level processes that you see somewhere through that phase. And I just wanted to highlight those again. So pandemic recovery, these are some of the things the city has done. Distributed $800,000 to over 100 businesses. Contributions to the Volunteers of America, up to the Senior Center, and then through the ARPA, which is the newest round of federal funding the city's received. Again, other grants to Volunteers of America, grants to the food bank, grants to the Senior Center, and then the city is holding back over $6 million that we're using as matching funds to help pay for all of these capital projects that you just saw and will be on our table. So planning grants, we did the missing middle housing grant a couple of years ago. That project was done, and that's sort of what came out of that grant funding. And with that grant, we just paid staff salaries with that grant, and staff did all of the work, but that's still a great savings into our general fund. The housing action plan, that's underway. We have a $100,000 grant for that, and we have a consultant do that work. We have a grant, our Shoreline Management Act, to do an inventory since we did the annexation. That's underway. We just received a grant to do a climate action plan, which will be a new element for a periodic update. And then we'll have about $125,000, which is sort of new money. The state hasn't done that for a lot of years, given comprehensive plan funding. So that's a big deal, and we've taken advantage of those grants as they've come through just as a pass through. Because historically, since I've been here 12 years, we didn't do that before sort of this year. Those funds just weren't available. So comp plan work staff has historically done, with the exception of some of our celebrated plans. Anyway, that's just kind of the list, and I just wanted to sort of share that with you to put in context when we talk about why we do a CFP. This is what comes out. Any questions for the folks here or virtually?
I actually have a question, if I may jump in. On the slide about parking downtown,
Yes.
maybe 4 slides ago, I've been asked whether or not once residential housing goes in downtown, whether or not that's going to be public or whether that parking is going to go private.
The lot that the city is selling to a private property owner, they will build their own parking lot attached to their property. It will be private to that development. Outside of that, there will be city parking that's available to everyone.
So the slide that you show tonight is all public and will stay public.
On Millsburg stays public. Yes.
Any other questions? All right. Move on to commissioners' reports. And I'll go ahead and go to our virtual commissioner,
Nothing from me this evening. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Nothing for me.
You have names?
I probably should have said this after the last presentation, but I thought the end there was great. We're showing it's easy to get caught up with these delegates as far as new asks and new funding, new grants and all that stuff. So I think it's good to go back and show what they've accomplished, and what the plan is, and I thought that was very well done. I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Commissioner Cronin, Dewar.
No report.
Commissioner Holt.
Just a double check, we're having a meeting on September 7th and the 21st, rather than 2 meetings in September? Or just one?
I think at this point, we probably would just be the one. I don't think we'll be the second one. I think September 7th
And the chair has nothing to report up for, thank you for a very good presentation. It's very informative. And we'll pass off to the planning director again.
Okay, I'm gonna let Dave kick it off, talking about what we're doing with our housing action plan, and then I'll talk a little bit about the industrial analysis.
Yeah, so just a really quick check-in on the housing action plan that's being funded by the grant from the Department of Commerce. So we do have a consultant for consulting that's helping with that. Really, their focus right now is kind of twofold. They're working on the housing needs analysis. That's really going to be the foundation for the actual action plan. We need to understand what our housing needs are before we kind of assess the current policies and programs that we have on the books already and identify any gaps or any actions or programs or strategies that we need to implement to help meet those housing needs. So they're anticipating having that housing needs analysis, which looks at different household types, household sizes, different housing types, as well as household types. And so we expect to have a draft of that available for staff's review within the next couple of weeks. We'll kind of refine that, kick that back out to the consultants, and then we do want both the planning commission and the city council to review that individual component of the housing action plan, just because the needs analysis is such an important component really before we get into the actions and strategies, just having the data that really grounds those strategies. So we'll provide you with an update on the schedule on that. I think we may have, some more information at the September 7th meeting that we can share with you on that. At the same time as the needs analysis work, they're also just kicking off some of the public engagements. We had kind of a very, very soft launch at Aquafest. We didn't have maybe the best location as far as our booth, so we weren't getting a whole lot of foot traffic, but we had some kind of general boards. We just wanted to raise awareness of the project, kind of get some information out to people's postcards, make them aware of the project, try to get some preliminary feedback, but it was a super hot day. I think people didn't want to be standing around answering questions about housing. So didn't get a whole lot on that, but we're going to be launching kind of what's called a story map. It's basically kind of a very illustrative, graphic intensive, kind of essentially kind of animated survey where you can kind of scroll through, have all sorts of visuals, and also be answering survey questions at the same time. We want to get feedback from kind of a wide variety of the stakeholders within the city of Lake Stevens. So we're working on that now. They just sent me kind of the framework for that over the last few days. So we're hoping to launch that over the next couple of weeks, just so we can really start the engagement component of the project. We really want to hear what, a variety of different people in Lake Stevens have to say about their housing needs, the types of housing that they think are needed in Lake Stevens. Affordability is going to be a major component of that. Obviously, we're starting to see a little bit of a correction, but housing costs are still going to shot up just exponentially over the past decade, coming out of the last recession. So we really want to get that input from the community. It's going to be a variety of online surveys. We're anticipating having kind of a housing forum probably in October that we can discuss, and we'd like the planning commission to really serve as kind of essentially kind of liaisons to the community and utilizing for that forum. And then also some direct kind of stakeholder interviews. And so we're identifying those groups now, and that'll be happening over the course of the next few months. And we'll make sure when we have our monthly, as we go back to the monthly meetings, or as we need a second meeting, the second meeting as needed, we'll be briefing you on kind of how that outreach is going. So happy to answer any questions on the housing action plan before Russ moves into the industrial area analysis.
So likewise with the industrial analysis, we've been doing a lot of data sharing. So we did hire a consultant team. So the main contractor is McKinsey, and we've brought on a bunch of subcontractors to do environmental work, civil engineering, and then the partner is also Eco West, who will do sort of the market analysis. As I said, we're doing a lot of data sharing right now. We're putting lists of property owners together. We hope to do our first community engagement in September. So even though we haven't hold this a formal second planning commission meeting, we'll definitely invite the planning commission to the public engagement in September with the industrial property owners. We've already identified some key property owners. Actually met with one yesterday just to have sort of an informal conversation about their needs and desires out there. So that project is moving along nicely. We'll be launching a webpage pretty soon. So you're probably familiar with our webpage. We have distinct tabs for all of our sub areas, and we'll sort of create a planning page for that to sort of highlight what we're doing, what the goals are, and just trying to keep that information flow going. And then hopefully we'll be able to have some significant information for the planning commission in the fall as they continue further into the work and actually have some at least throughout the deliverables. And so we have a full schedule at least through the fall with that. So,
Any other questions? I have one question, I guess go back to our other things. When will the comp plan come back to us as a holistic? Are we gonna have another discussion or are we gonna go to public hearing?
I think unless you want to have another check-in before we move on to the public hearing, we kind of have work sessions and all. Comments of it, we haven't done the connection yet, but that's just, so.
I think after our last discussion, which I think was the biggest part of the. I think personally, I think we'd be ready for a public hearing as the next one.
We are, so yeah, we can work on a schedule with like. We need to do our noticing to the state, so I could work on that. Schedule to find out the next meeting. Obviously, if we only have the one meeting in September, I could have it in October, so we'll have that started out for you. Yeah.
Great.
and just to sort of a quick follow up to that, we have heard from one property owner that we were contemplating doing some zoning changes. And they've actually said, hey, we have plans underway to do a different type of development. So that would be reflected in materials that would come back to you, maybe revised recommendation for some of the areas that we're analyzing.
And the general feedback that we heard as far as the kind of the area further north on 99 that you felt it was probably better to kind of hold that off until kind of a more thorough discussion as part of the board update as opposed to kind of squeezing that in on this one. That's kind of what we're going to be briefing the city council on that. And so I think the one thing, you were more definitive on the 97 drive southeast, and so that's also something that will brief the city council on as well. Just as far as should that, so we consider this year, or do we do that as part of a larger analysis of the land use designation throughout the whole city as part of the 2024 update? So, yeah, definitely give that feedback.
Great. So there's another question. Our next meeting then will be September 7th. And as we were talking before the meeting started, are the farmers market over on September 7th? So we'll be meeting at the mill at 6 p.m. on the 7th, right? So anybody else have any questions? Can I get a motion to adjourn? I got a motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That's it. We're adjourned. Thank you all so much.